Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I was asked by the Solicitors Journal to be a guest columnist, writing a short commentary for their publication, and as a result one of my articles has appeared in their journal. It's this edition here. It's the Solicitors Journal, volume 159, number 31, for the 11th of August 2015, and I am actually appearing with Robert Buckland on page 18. Now, the actual article itself is there. There is a version which is online. You can see me there and you can see Robert Buckland there. I was very grateful to Robert Buckland for allowing me to meet him and interview him. He is the Solicitor General for England and Wales, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened when we met. Because many people don't really know that much about the work he does or who he is, and I thought it would be useful to explain what he does and to try to set a picture without making any strong critical comments or any observations outside the general formula of what we set out to do in the first place, which was to just do a general statement of the sort of work he does and who he is. So the title of the interview and my actual comment is "The Office of Solicitor General 500 Years On." And then it says Phillip Taylor MBE profiles the law officer's role with current Solicitor General Robert Buckland, Queen's Counsel and Member of Parliament. Now this is what I say. So how many Solicitor Generals, or rather, let me start that again. How many Solicitors General have you met, and do you know what they do? Looking at a list, I reckon I've met about a dozen over 40 years, but I'm sure many legal commentators can do much better than that. I asked the current Solicitor General, Robert Buckland QC MP, he's the MP for Swindon South, for an interview about his work, and I found very quickly how little is really known of the role of the two law officers, particularly that of the Solicitor General, who is the deputy to the Attorney General, who is currently Jeremy Wright QC MP, and we all think we know much more about them than we actually do, hence the motivation for writing this article. Most of us as lawyers will go back to two books from our days as law students for a clue on the role. The first one being Rodney Brazier's Ministers of the Crown in 1997, and the even earlier book by Professor Edwards, The Law Officers of the Crown in 1964, which actually came from Toronto. The reality of the appointments is now rather different, however, as they act as the government's family lawyers. Brazier describes the ancient offices as, quote, ministerial in character, setting the date of the office of Solicitor General from 1515, on the authority of no lesser a legal luminary than Sir William Anson, in his divinative work, The Law and Customs of the Constitution, which was published in 1907. Now today, our two law officers are active politicians, albeit ones charged with special ministerial duties, and fascinatingly are able to give legal advice to such a rare client. Buckland's office can be traced back to what is seen as its first recognised holder, Sir John Port, and this would be around 1514 to 1515, and Port was later involved in the trials of Sir Thomas More and Anne Boleyn, and it indicates therefore that the post was mostly developed during the Tudor period. And we've got a subtitle here, Delicate Duties. I rather like the way they put that one in. What immediately becomes noticeable, and this happened when I did the interview, is the approach law officers are required to adopt and have developed over the centuries. They've performed some delicate duties which have been devolved upon them. Tricky would appear to be the word. This has led to the need to achieve a balance between the political ticket they have been elected on in the House of Commons and the legal responsibility to give the government of the day bad news when the occasion demands it. which can be quite frequent without going into any specific cases. And this is where Robert Buckland comes in. He has what I thought was a very refreshing approach to his work, and that's why David Cameron appointed him on a dry St Swithin's Day in 2014. He was born in Llanelli, and Buckland was educated at Durham and called to the bar at Inner Temple at the same time as me in 1991, so we're contemporaries. His early years in practice were predominantly on the Wales and Chester circuit, with work at chambers in Swansea, specialising in criminal matters, and he actually comes effectively from that background, although I would say that most of us of that call date generation would actually have pretty substantial initial criminal work expertise because of the way the bar course was at that time and also the sort of work you get in pupillage. We then get on to another interesting subhead from the editor, Human Rights and Austere Britain. Now, the first inquiry then that I had was inevitably about human rights and where we are today. Buckland disclosed that he did go on strike with colleagues over legal aid cuts some years ago and is well aware of the specific problems at the criminal bar, which of course any member of council is. Both he and the attorney are very well aware of what we face in austerity Britain, though they don't have the power to do much about the cuts, even if they wanted to. And that really is one of the problems that many people I deal with, and I come from wearing my political hat here, I come to it saying, well, they think we can do things. Well, we can't. There is actually quite a substantial limitation on one individual's powers, but that doesn't stop us from expressing views, notwithstanding we might be office holders or representing the government. So consequently, dealing effectively with the human rights issue really is an exercise in the art of the possible. And in a speech on Human Rights Day last year, that would have been 2014, Buckland said this: "My practice in South Wales was predominantly criminal legal aid, so the liberty of the individual lay at the heart of work. I've been a human rights lawyer, like thousands of fellow barristers and solicitors, for nearly 25 years. It's just that I didn't think to call myself one." Now, I have to say again that I, like many others, fall into that category as well, but we've never labelled ourselves like that. The quote then surely sums up virtually all lawyers' feelings towards human rights, and it was apparent that human rights reform will run for many months, certainly from the discussions and when I interviewed him, before we actually see any new proposals from the incoming government. So at least we've got some idea that it is going to be a longer term matter. The solicitor provides support for the Attorney General in a number of particular areas, and I was interested to explore those. Superintendents of the Treasury Solicitors Department, now called the Government Legal Department, the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, the Service Prosecuting Authority, HM Crown Prosecuting Service Inspectorate, and the Serious Fraud Office, the SFO. He also offers support on civil litigation and advice on civil law matters and the public interest function. And as an aside, in typical British style, of course, the post of Solicitor General is held by none other than a barrister, and Buckland does appear in court regularly. And that I think is an important thing to bear in mind, because I didn't realise, in fact, that he was a regular attender presenting cases in court, and that was something that we didn't look at in much detail, but I think it's important for people to realise that's what he does do. The continuing development of legal apprenticeship schemes is another area we looked at. It's an important policy for the law officers, and it continues after re-evaluation, if I can put it that way, of the Addleshaw Goddard, I'll get it right, initiative on offering higher apprenticeships. Buckland's a great communicator, as I certainly found out when I interviewed him, and he has an infective enthusiasm for the Legal Trailblazer Apprenticeship Scheme, which is the start of a new entry route into the profession, and one certainly I was interested to hear his views on, because we've all heard, and I, as head of chambers myself, get a lot of people inquiring about how to get into the profession. So I'm really grateful to see that there is some serious thinking going on, and linking in, of course, to some of the leading firms. We get on to public legal education, another little subhead put in here, one of my important areas, PLE. So with the end of the legal aid for all culture, which will not return in the foreseeable future, where do we go with the vexed question of litigants in person? The solicitor confirmed his strong support for the continuing development of the Public Legal Education Initiative, that's the PLE, which has had an important role to play in modern legal proceedings if access to justice is going to be made and continue to be made available to all. Tasked with maintaining the 800-year-old Runnymede-born rule of law, PLE then is being rolled out in welfare law and is another key priority for the experienced law officers during this Parliament. And I do think that's something that has been underestimated. It's not a party political thing, as far as I see it, at all, but it is a sensible and constructive way forward, and I'm very glad to see that there's so much support coming from this part of the government. The final subhead that they've given is political processes. And here, this is what I said in concluding. The public are clearly well served by our current law officers, who, if nothing else, act as a brake on some of the more outrageous policies of the day, although they remain to some extent outsiders from the party political process because of their functions, and you can see how sensible that is. It's astonishing that criticisms still surface from the usual suspects about new appointees emerging as complete unknowns to many on appointment. But that's the political process in practice. After all, who'd heard of Margaret Thatcher or John Major as they emerged from the ministerial shadows to become party leaders? And I'm not going to mention any other ones in other parties, because the fact of the matter is reality. That is, we know them within our little global village, but outside in the general public domain, I'm glad we don't know too much about them in some ways, because they can get on with the work without being trammelled all the time. But that's just an aside. So finally, my conclusion was the law is in two safe pairs of hands in the Attorney and the Solicitor General, who are starting their new terms of office after their respective political pupilages under the coalition government. I hope they don't mind if I put it that way. Neither are jobs I would wish for, I can say, but the work is fascinating and they do it well. And I'm sure there will be many more hard cases for them to handle in the future years. So thank you very much, and a very happy 500th anniversary, Solicitor General. And Robert, thank you very much for your time. It was most gratefully appreciated. And also to the staff at the Solicitors Journal, which I'll just plug again. There we go. For allowing me to be one of your guest commentators. Thank you. It's an excellent journal. Bye-bye.